I'm back for week number 4 of the parable of the sower. This will be our last lesson, at least for this particular section of the Bible, this particular study that we're doing right now. And today we're going to focus particularly in the parable of the sower out of Matthew, on Matthew 13, 8, and 9, where it talks about this, where it says this very specifically in the Bible. It says, "Still other seed fell on good soil where it produced a good crop. 160 or 30 times what was sown." So we're talking about fertile soil today. We're talking about a result of possibly 110-fold crop from what was originally planted. And so, everyone loves a good story. Stories do amazing things for us, whether it's a movie or a book. It has the ability to move us into ways that we wouldn't normally be able to move into. There have been a lot of good storytellers throughout history, but yet none better than Jesus. Jesus was the master storyteller. In fact, nearly 1/3 of the words of Jesus recorded in Scripture were stories, more accurately called, parables, as we're talking about these days. These stories used everyday examples to have eternal truths. So, perhaps the parables have the unique ability to transcend space and time. These were written how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, yet that we can still take them today and apply them into our lives. So they transcend space and time. And you see, in Jesus' stories, you don't just encounter characters, you are the character. You're not just reading a story, you're actually reading your story. Each micro story Jesus tells is a micro story of your life at some point or another. So, want to know where you fit into God's story, possibly? Here's your script. Matthew 13, 1 through 23. Jesus tells the gathered crowds a story we call the parable of the sower. In this story, Jesus seems to be addressing a common question of the day. Are we good with God? Or are we not? Are we really a part of the kingdom of God that you speak of? Well, Jesus didn't want anyone to miss the mark. He would do whatever it took to have them hear these words and actually hear these words. And so he wanted to be clear. He wants everyone everywhere to know exactly where they stand with God, and that includes you, and it includes me. The problem Jesus reveals is that most people claim that they have a right standing with God because they've heard the good news of God. In this parable, Jesus says it's not just those who simply hear the good news of God, the message of the gospel, that are part of the family of God, but rather those that hear and respond appropriately. The focus of the parable is not so much on the seed, but on the soil. And we all must find ourselves in this story that's representing the different kinds of soil, either spoiled soil, they call it, or loyal soil. And there's 4 types, just review for you quickly. There's the rock, that hard-headed and even harder-hearted. They've heard about salvation and the new life in Jesus, but they continually choose to not respond with faith or with following. And then there's the shallow soil. We talked about this part when we talked about being burned out. The person hears the gospel and responds initially with great joy and enthusiasm. And for instance, like in church circles, people will walk the aisle, make a decision, and their initial response is very, very enthusiastic. They're all in, but they burn out quickly. Or things of life cause us to get burnt out quickly. Things that are coming in on us. Sometimes just the drudgery of everyday life just burns us out, and we can't produce fruits because our roots are not deep enough. They get burned out. Shallow soil. And then we talked about weed infested soil, or soil that we're crushed in upon. And so I talked to you about my morning glory story, how even beautiful things have to be tended to. Sometimes even beautiful things will push out the better things in life, or in that beautiful garden that you might have planted in your yard. The person that might have the weed infested soil hears the gospel of Jesus, responds in faith, and begins to grow deep roots. The problem is that they have allowed so many other things to take root and grow alongside that they shade out and choke out the power of the gospel in their life. Jesus alluded to worry, wealth, work. And isn't it funny that the more times change, the more they really, really do stay the same? People 2,000 years ago were struggling to pursue Jesus in the very same way that we do today. And as such, an initial faith response is shaded. It gets choked out by other desires to the point that they no longer are faithful to their initial decision to pursue Jesus. And so Jesus' equation looks like this: faithfulness leads to fruitfulness. And so, when I say faithfulness leads to fruitfulness, it leads me into places where so many of my friends in these days have planted their gardens, waiting, especially in this time. How fantastic to have a garden to grow your vegetables and some of your fruits so that you'll just have them in your backyard. You won't have to go to that grocery store with your mask on and just put ourselves at the risk that we do. And so as I kind of push into the end of this section, I want to just show you some gardens that I love and talk a little bit further about what does the faithful, fruitful Christian life actually look like. So I'm going to, my next shot will be, God willing, out of a garden. So I'm here now. I've crossed the Bossier-Shreveport line. I'm over in Shreveport this afternoon in the backyard of some good friends of mine, enjoying their garden. Actually, their backyard, but most recently, good friends of mine, Jack and Mandy Odell, many of you may know them. I came and hopped into their backyard, keeping my social distance appropriately, and I just wanted to talk to you today. And as we've talked about good soil, there is a lot that is said about the faithful, fruitful. I said earlier, faithfulness leads to fruitfulness, and there's a lot to be said about the fruitful, faithful Christian when we look at gardens and we talk about soil and tending to the soil. Jesus says we will know a disciple not by his seed, but by his soil, not by the sprout, but by the fruit. And I'm going to walk you around this garden in a minute because it's fantastic, and you'll just want to have your own garden after you see this one. I do. But Paul gives a pretty good description of the fruit-filled life. He says it out of Galatians 5:22 through 23. He says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And if the seed of the Spirit is rooted in us, if it's deep-rooted, then we can't help but produce the fruit of the Spirit." Because have you ever planted an apple seed and not got an apple tree? I mean, whatever is planted is what will grow. And so I'm going to walk around just a little bit. Mandy and I were talking earlier. I'm going to try to keep this forward. It's hard. I'm having to carry my computer around with me because my phone battery is so low. And so here we are. This is Mandys Garden. And I want you to see different rows. Different kinds of leaves. And in here, we've got, even right here is a blackberry bush. Fantastic stuff. But all we expect to get out of this garden is from the seeds that we plant, or what the seeds were intended to grow. Now, we've talked about there's a lot of stuff in here. If you can see it, I'm going to try to show it to you. In between the rows, a lot of pretty green stuff, but nonetheless, it's not going to bear fruit. It is going to grow a tree. We've got a big mimosa tree over here, and the mimosa tree is throwing all of its little seeds down over here, trying to crush out these particular vegetables that are growing. Well, what will happen? Mandy's going to pull up the things that aren't supposed to be growing to let the other things grow exactly the way that they're supposed to. And so I'm trying to follow my notes, and I'm trying to help you see this beautiful garden that's behind me. So simply put, if we were going to say simply put, if we water it, if we fertilize it, if we weed it, it's going to reap the harvest at the right time, the right kind of fruit. It's going to be 110-fold if we do that, if we tend to it. So followers of Jesus look more and more like Jesus each and every day, step by step, day by day. They take on those fruits of the Spirit. It can't be helped if you're doing it with a true heart. Sitting back down, it's wearing me out. I'm getting my steps in, and my muscles in my arms are getting exercise too. Here we are. Sorry about that little segue. It says pretty simply, your fruit will prove your root. And so what kind of fruit grows on your tree are the questions that we should be asking now. We're having to pick some new fruit these days. We're kind of having to reinvent how we share our gifts, with other people. There's the garden. How do we share our gifts with other people? My grandfather was a farmer. He was a watermelon farmer. Well, I always said he grew chickens and he grew watermelons. And we would go every year, me and my family, my mother, my 4 brothers and sisters, we would go every year, several times a year, to Grandpa Jones's farm in Hope, Arkansas, or somewhere thereabouts. It may have been not exactly Hope, but somewhere thereabouts. And we would see the watermelons coming up, and we played football with the little watermelons. There was also a grapevine that was over there, kind of near the proximity to the watermelon field. And I learned that the fruit grows on the vine, but if you pick it too soon and try to make it do something ahead of time before it's ready, well, it's pretty sour. It's pretty awful. In fact, I don't advise eating a grape that's not ripe. And so you wait until the fruit is ripe for it to do what it's supposed to do. And so, the farmer knows that his work is a long way from finished, even when the seed just sprouts. All the effort that he put into it wasn't necessarily to get the sprout, it was to get the harvest. The harvest is where you have full grown, crops full of produce with enough good produce that you're able to set back a portion into the granaries to seed next year's crop, right? The goal is produce so you can reproduce. The goal is to produce so you can reproduce. Jesus wants us to understand that the focus of the Christian life isn't only a pursuit of personal holiness. The real focus of the follower of Jesus is to produce fruit that reproduces followers. I once heard it best when it says, your fruit will grow other trees. Your fruit will grow other trees. So where do you find yourself in this story? What kind of soil are you? What do your roots look like? And what does your fruit look like? The answer, I believe, is the ability to set your priorities and to integrate the Word into your daily lives of service and care for others. Read and study the Word every day. We read and study the Word. When we do that, we should do so not as an academic experience. Does that make sense? But by thinking of practical applications. And that's why I say these parables are not a story, they're your story. What does it mean to be me? How can I use these principles in my talk with God? The Word is designed to be a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our way in our daily living. We struggle to understand, and God's Word is the answer. The entry to thy world giveth light. It giveth understanding unto the simple. That's Psalms 119, 130. The entrance of thy word giveth light. It giveth understanding unto the simple. Psalms 119, 130. So think of it this way. God, who designed our bodies and our souls, loves us and wants us to serve Him faithfully. And He wants our lives to be fruitful. He wants those things that are being planted into our hearts, those things that are being planted into the ground, those things that are growing in that soil that you tend to, that you water, that you fertilize. He wants them to bring fruit into your life. He wants our lives to be fruitful, and He wants to bring fruit to perfection. And how is He going to accomplish that with you? That is your question. And the answer, of course, is, and it's verse 15 out of Luke 8. I'm going to slam back over to Luke again. And it says, but that on good ground are they, which in an honest and good heart have heard the word, keep it, and bring forth fruit with patience. Does that patience word make you just want to step sideways for a second? Are we losing a little bit of patience in these days where we're having to do things so differently? Or are you finding your rhythm and finding yourself creatively moving into the new spaces that, well, have been just a little bit forced on us? You know, Jesus teaches us that we must have a healthy and wholesome attitude towards God's word. An honest and good heart is what we're talking about. And so don't choke out the word with your cares. Rather, let the word teach you how to deal with every care, whether represented by a person or a circumstance. May we all remember that and be found, casting our cares upon Him because He cares for us. That's 1 Peter 5:7. So we have to hold fast to the word and stick to what is revealed and refuse to compromise any clear teaching of the Bible. You know, fruit, we bring forth fruit with patience. And Rome wasn't built in a day. I said that kind of in the preview of this when I talked about this last week. It may take time, much time, to soften the hard heart of an adversary, even our own hard hearts sometimes, or even a loved one, and to see them make application to the gospel in their lives. Be patient with yourself and be patient with other people. It is your patience that possesses ye your souls. In your patience possess ye your souls. Luke 21:19. And just remember the example of those said, who through faith and patience inherit the promises. Hebrews 6:12. So here's the beauty of the story. The end that is not written yet. Have you ever heard the saying that you are the continuation of the book of Acts? You know, here is the beauty of your story, and the end is not written yet. How it ends is up to you. If you need to make some changes in your life, it's never too late to make changes. Respond to the good news and flame your fire, or the flame of your fire with the word of Christ, as we talked about last time. Start growing deep roots that produce good fruit. Do the hard work, and it is hard work. You know, it's not going to just happen that this beautiful garden behind me is just going to grow and only the plants in it will grow. They're going to have to pluck up some things even that might be nice to have growing in there, but they will choke out the other good things. So start growing your deep root and let them produce good fruit. Do the hard work of the weeding. Weed out anything that could possibly choke the life out of your pursuit of Christ. Reproduce followers of Jesus. It's like sow, reap, repeat. Sow, reap, repeat. And so we, like the sower, have the responsibility to proclaim the message of the kingdom of the gospel to the world. We will be aware that not everyone will receive it by faith. You know, the evidence of those who receive it by faith and act on it in their lives, it's just going to change them, and it will change you too. To advance the kingdom, the spiritual life does not occur instantly. It's just time. It takes time for the plant to grow. It takes time for the roots to go down, but it is a continual process. It's our task to know and understand this message well so that we can present it all clearly and meaningful as possible, not just with our words, but with the way that we live our lives. And the rest is not up to us. And if it's just not, you know, that even our hearing and understanding of the word is not up to us. It is given by God. It is given by God. And so let us remember when we see new gardens being planted right now. Even in my own home, I have some new flower beds, and I love them so much, and it blesses me to see the flowers grow. But they won't grow all on their own most of the time. They have to be fed, and I have to water them and take care of them, pluck out the weeds when they show up. And so will the care of this garden will do the same. So I pray that these words have encouraged you in some way as we've kind of walked through these days. I pray that you will continue to study the Word as your roots grow deeper and as your fruit comes to ripen, that you'll just know the goodness of God in your life. I'll see you soon. God bless.